Hello, everyone. I'm Cynthia Myers Morrison and a board member for Food Addiction Institute and your host for this session with Debbie Danowski, who is a PhD and is an associate professor of communication and media at Sacred Heart University. Her research focuses on representations of addictive behavior in advertising. Her book, Happy Eating and Food Addiction in American Advertising with Lexington Books, is a groundbreaking analysis of the addictive and eating disorder behaviors in ultra-processed food advertisements. She's also the author of 5 popular books about food addiction and emotional eating, including Why Can't I Stop Eating with Hazelden, The Emotional Eater's Book of Inspiration, Da Capo, and the recently released Manless, a celebration of single life and achieving deeper fulfillment on your own with Urano. So, with no further ado, Debbie Danowski, I'm so pleased to have you here and welcome you. My first question after reading your extraordinary book, really a picture of my whole life in advertising. Oh my gosh. So, do food advertisements really create or cause food addiction?
Well, first, thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be here. And no, the answer is no, they don't actually cause it like a direct cause, but they do contribute to what we call societal denial, which was, written about by Phil Wardell in his book about denial. But also, it's been recognized that as a society, we uphold certain denial behaviors. And I think that for that, food advertisements do that, and they also promote addictive eating because the more products they sell, the more money they make. So the short answer is no, but they contribute to food addiction. It's their job. For them to sell these products and to sell as many as they possibly can, and then add to that the ingredients in the products, and you have a situation where they're encouraging you to eat addictive products.
So, what techniques do the food advertisers use to convince us to buy their food? I like the quotations around that.
Oh, there's so many. A lot of times, probably one of the most popular is where they associate something healthy with the food that is actually not healthy. So you would see people exercising in a commercial for like candy or something, or you would see people outdoors running around for, a granola bar that's ultra processed, or you would see they would promote relaxation. You deserve a break today. We've heard that how many times in our lives and how many different ways. And what they're saying is you deserve a break to away from the stress of your life. However, the way to get it isn't to eat unhealthy food, but those are the techniques. Or they put a piece of fruit in the advertisement where what little there is of the fruit in that product is minuscule and not healthy anymore after they've processed it. So those are some of the techniques. But another one is mascots. They use mascots who are cute and friendly to sell you a product that is actually not healthy.
And I was remembering, like, I made notes: Snap, Crackle, and Pop, the Cracker Jack and Jill, the Jolly
Uh-huh.
Green Giant, Charlie the Tuna, Colonel Sanders, Cool Aid Man,
Mhm.
Ronald McDonald, and my favorite
Right.
always, Toby the Tiger. So could you elaborate some more on that and how the mascots play into this advertising for ultra processed food, sort of?
Yes. I'm so happy you brought up Tony the Tiger because to me he is one of the biggest examples of the way to create a decades-long campaign to sell unhealthy food. And when we say ultra processed, we're talking about the foods that, we wouldn't just find in our kitchen that have been, concocted. They're more like food substances and they actually are, food that by the time it's done. And with cereals, we're talking about them being high in sugar and sometimes high fructose corn syrup and many other ingredients that are unhealthy. And so Tony came along around 1951, and in the beginning he was just simply, it was a super energy campaign. So what that meant was if you ate this cereal, you would have energy. And in the 1950s, we didn't know all that much about sugar and all the dangers of it, and we certainly didn't think of it as being addictive. So when he took in the 1950s, they turned it around to if you eat this cereal, you have energy. And part of that's true because you do get a high, but you get a crash right after. So most of the commercials were focused on some sort of activity with that Tony the Tiger. He wasn't as slick as he was today. He was black and white a lot of times, and he just, he didn't look like he does today. But so in the 50s, they introduced him. Then in the 60s, it was put a tiger on your team. That was their campaign. If you have Tony the Tiger with you, then you are going to be able to do all these sports things, and you're going to be able to concentrate in school because they started advertising a little bit more directed towards children. And then we get into the meeting Tony's family. He has two children and he has a wife, and we saw them eating breakfast. Of course, they were eating Frosted Flakes. And it's interesting because in the beginning they were called sugar Frosted Flakes, and then they dropped the sugar when the backlash happened. So now they're Frosted Flakes. And in the 80s and the 90s, we had Tony brings out the tiger, bring out the tiger in you. So Tony was responsible for bringing out the tiger in children who wanted to participate in sports but weren't any good. One of the most upsetting commercials I watched from that time period was a girl who was upset because she couldn't water ski and everybody else was water skiing. So Tony gave her breakfast, told her she could do it. And then by the time the commercial is finished, you see Tony water skiing alongside of her, and she's doing these maneuvers that probably can only be done by a professional. So here's children now, we're into like the 80s and the 90s. So already the first generation in the 50s, who grew up have children of themselves. And now these children are looking at it and thinking, wow, if I eat these Frosted Flakes, then I can do these things. And now their parents who have also recognized that Tony the Tiger was in their lives are happy to buy the cereal that they think is healthy. And then you get into the 2000s, and by this time, Tony is a celebrity. He gets fan mail, he gets all sorts of things, and he keeps promoting this in the same way. They changed, up that this time it was let your grade out, when we get into the mid 2000s, and the grade is always drawn out like, they're great, like Frosted Flakes. And again, it's all about Tony and how he eating this cereal makes you a better whatever it is you want to be in sports. It's usually physical activity. And then we get into in 2019, and we talk about how Tony's targeted middle school sports. And so what's happened there is he's teamed up with professional athletes, and they're giving money. If you buy a box of Frosted Flakes and you go to the website and I don't know, redeem it, then they'll give a certain portion of that money to a middle school in need of sports equipment. So it looks really good on the outside because here's the cereal company with Tony the Tiger who comes to the schools and makes this big deal, and they're donating all this money for sports programs, which is a healthy, good thing. However, you have to eat the cereal to get the sports program. So by this time, everybody loves Tony. It's called Mission Tiger. Everything is about Tony. And he's become, in a way, to some children the schools are almost always, lower socioeconomic areas where, in a lot of cases, there are children who don't live with their fathers. So Tony has become this father figure to these children, promoting this product that is unhealthy, addictive, and has no real health benefit to it. So that's a long answer to your question.
But a very apt one, truly, truly apt. What you mentioned some of the things being disturbing to you. What were some of the most disturbing advertisements that you experienced?
I think that, some of the cereal ones were disturbing, but the one that was really, really, I think probably the most disturbing, it was called Whole Bag Kinda Night, and it was presented as a debut music video, and it was from Skinny Pop Popcorn. So before I even talk about it, we notice whole bag kind of night. So those who are addicted to food, it's common to eat a whole bag of something and then go on for more. And then the idea that it's a music debut when it's really a commercial for the product. And it was up, it was singing, it was dancing, it was interesting to watch. And it debuted on New Year's Eve in 2021. Now, anybody who knows anything about addiction knows that New Year's Eve is a very vulnerable time for especially women who might think that they should be out there but don't want to be because they want to be home with their food. And that's what this commercial was all about. It was all about how these five women were going to have a whole bag kind of night. They were going to eat the whole bag of this popcorn with skinny in the title. And one talked about how she was going to take a bath and she's shown in the bathtub eating the popcorn. One talked about how she had to unwind from the week and she's eating the popcorn. And another talked about how it's just her and her bag of popcorn. And so this is a binge. I mean, this product is promoting a binge. And and then they always say it's only three ingredients in this product and making it appear to be healthy. And so there's popcorn, there's sunflower oil, and there's salt. And sunflower oil appears to be pretty healthy, and yet the way that it's processed, it is not. It's high heat extraction, chemical washing, bleaching, all those sorts of things to make this sunflower oil, plus the amount that's in there. And this is only, like, the real kicker is this is only in the original flavor, not in all the other flavors. Most of the other flavors have sugar in them. And the ones that they're shown eating in the video are the other flavors, mostly. So, there's a lot going on here. So they could, promote this as this video, but really it was one long commercial encouraging people to binge.
And that one bag night. My sister and I often talked about the fact that one bag could be this big, or one bag could be this big. And
Hmm.
whatever the bag size was, that was how much each of us was going to eat. So
That's right.
the best we could do was to contain the bag size. It that's
Hmm.
a terrible binge, really. Oh my goodness. What, in terms of um, children and how we might support families to choose real food. You mentioned real food and Lustig, Dr. Robert Lustig, and his idea that real food would be a big improvement over the ultra processed substances, sometimes called food, that so
Hmm.
many of us are eating now. And the numbers that were included in terms of obesity and in terms of food addiction in our country specifically, but around the world, where can we intervene? How can we support families to choose real food as opposed to the things that are touted as being healthy?
I think for me, my answer would be first to make your children aware of the tricks that are in advertising. Um, it seems kind of almost counterproductive to start with the advertisements, but most of us don't really understand how much influence these advertisements have over us. Some experts say we watch between 3 and 5,000 advertisements a day we see. That includes the logos on your jacket and billboards and all that kind of stuff. But, and we've done plenty of studies where, there were 12 to 14-year-olds who said that when the product was promoted, they found that when the product was promoted by a thin actor in the commercial, they believed the food to be healthier. So, if you put a piece of fruit in the commercial, then children believe it's healthier. So I think parents have to start there. I wish we had a nationwide media literacy program in schools because I think it would, not just for food, but also, the images we see that have been digitally altered. I teach at the college level and I see students who just want to look like those images in those magazines, and it's not possible. The images in those magazines don't look like themselves in real life.
Yeah.
And I think that probably the first thing is to talk to your children about the ads and the messages. If you eat a lot of this product, if you eat a lot of Frosted Flakes or any cereal or any ultra processed food, you're going to gain weight and you're not going to be able to run around and do the things that you want to do. Not that we should make children afraid of gaining weight, but and we should talk about the health benefits too, and I think that's the first step. And then I think another step is to really limit your purchases. As a parent, you have to model behavior for your children. You can't sit there and eat this stuff and say, don't you eat this stuff, because it doesn't work that way. And so, if you kind of stick toward the outside of the grocery store aisles, all the things we've been taught, but reading the ingredients, that's key. If there's something in there that you don't have in your kitchen, then it's probably not going to be good for you. And even then, with these three ingredients, sunflower oil sounds very healthy. So you have to really do some research. It's on the consumer now. We don't have the protection from unhealthy foods that I believe we should, at the governmental level, because every time they've tried to do stuff, people have rebelled because they don't want, and I can understand that, people don't want the government in their food. But yet we let these manufacturers get away with all the unhealthy ingredients in these foods. So as a parent, it's your responsibility to look at these foods and see what's in them and do some research.
So if it comes in a bag or a box or with a label with 15 different, 20, 30 different items in it, we really, as individuals, need to be attentive to this, and it's probably not real food.
Absolutely. We don't really see a lot of ads for vegetables or salads, and there's a reason for that because they're not, the ultra processed foods in the bags or the boxes that you're, talking about, they are very cheap to produce and there's a high profit margin. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of money available to advertise them. However, vegetables, they don't have that same high profit margin, but they are much, much healthier.
Well, you talked about another aspect that had to do with saving the world, and that one was mind-boggling. Could you
Mhm.
speak a little bit about that one? I would like to save the world
Sure.
from food addiction
Well,
and ultra-processed substances.
wouldn't you? Well, this is in my book. I talk about how many ultra processed food manufacturers advertise their products under the guise of social causes. Ben and Jerry's had an Earth Day ad in 2015, and they just showed this ice cream melting, and they said this is what happens when ice cream is just 2 degrees warmer than it should be. And then they released a flavor called Save Our Swirled ice cream and to encourage action on climate change. Now, we don't really need Ben and Jerry's I mean, it's a nice effort and it looks really good on the outside, but if Ben and Jerry's just wanted to donate money rather than not sell a product, they wouldn't have needed to introduce that Save Our Swirled ice cream was what it was called. And um, you know, that they're trying to make money in that way. And if they really want to save the world, somebody wants to save the world or whatever, they donate money or they take action. But the way that these food manufacturers do it is they make you think that if you buy their product or they advertise about how, they're making themselves look socially responsible to save the world. Ocean Spray has, we can't just take from nature. Wall's ice cream did Walls did an ice cream shortage due to global warming. They did an ad like that. Like they're trying to scare people into making changes, but they're also trying to sell products. So, I know as a food addict, if I think there's going to be a shortage of any kind of food, I'm out there first in line to buy as many as I can. So, the what looks like it might be a really good thing isn't really, if they, it just isn't saving the world. Saving the world would be if we could get fruits and vegetables to children in areas where they aren't available. If we could cut down our carbon emissions and things like that, but not through advertising.
Mhm. Could you talk a little bit about rebellion? Because I was part of the 60s and the rebellion, and that that rang very true for me.
Sure. Well, I think probably one of the most famous commercials was from 1984. It was the Wendy's Where's the Beef? We had Clara Peller in there. She's adorable, adorable older woman who was yelling at them, "Where's the beef?" There wasn't enough beef on her, on her burger, on her fast food burger. And Wendy's was supposed to be the answer to that. But the rebellion was against healthy eating most of the time. We know today that red meat isn't as healthy as we once thought that it could be. The things that are done to the animals before before they make it into the products are, introducing chemicals and things into us, and the things that are put into those burgers aren't healthy. So, but when we look at a commercial like that, this woman is defending her right to have more of this product that isn't healthy. To be fair, we didn't know that much. We started to learn in the 80s, but
Mhm.
now we have, um, there was a 2020 commercial in the UK for the Rebel Whopper, which, it said it had no beef and it was supposed to be a woke burger against, changing the dangers of climate change and all that. And they found out that in the US we called it the Impossible Whopper, and they found out that it was being cooked right alongside those with meat in it. And the way that they make that burger is by putting more ultra processed foods in there so that the beef isn't there. Have it your way. We knew that one in the 70s from Burger King. You can have it exactly when you want it, how you want it at Burger King. And there's rebellion in that, and and to think that, what is it an addict wants, as an addict, I want what I want when I want it. And that's what Burger King is playing on. And all they're really saying is you could get the Whopper without lettuce, or you could get it with extra mayonnaise, or but they're making it appear that you're rebelling against eating healthy. But I think probably the most disturbing one was a commercial from McDonald's, and it said, "The thing you want." It had a picture of the Big Mac, and it right across it, it said, "The thing you want when you eat salad." And you think about that, what you're really saying there is you want that burger. And if you want to rebel against salad, go have that burger. If we use food as a way to rebel against, what are we really rebelling against? Eating healthy and taking care of ourselves. So,
I really, it resonated with me. It did. And then you talked about the caloric count of the salads that were available with all these
mhm.
high fructose corn syrup and other substances in them that are presented not just with vegetables, but all these other things that went into the salad. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's disturbing. You had a whole list and went through each one carefully in the book, so I do a disservice by just naming them. But you said that advertisements were used for the rebellion, for play, for relaxation, for achieving
Mhm.
happiness. Could you talk some
Mhm.
about achieving happiness? Oh, and replacing exercise too. I especially like that one.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure.
If it were true.
Yes. Well, the happiness is really, it's very common in the advertisements. In food advertisements especially, we look at one of the mascots we haven't mentioned is the Poppin' Fresh, the Pillsbury Doughboy. And, there used to be a slogan about bake somebody happy, or, you know, or love, that love is another one. And they kind of go together is, i- if we eat this food, we'll be happy. There's the picture of the mom in the bathtub who, yes, it involves relaxation. She's got the bathroom door locked from the kids and she's eating an ice cream bar, and she's supposed to be happy at that point with her children wondering where she is, and eating this food is the way that she's going to be happy and relax and do all those other things, and it's just not right. It's just not the way it works. If we actually eat these foods, then what happens is we feel depressed after we've eaten, a bunch of sugar or a bunch of these kinds of food. And depression is one of the side effects of eating ultra processed food. There are lots of consequences, and depression is one of them. And so we're saying if you eat this food, you'll be happy, when in reality, it's actually causing people to feel depressed.
Mhm.
And there's just a lot of examples out there right now with that.
That is one of those heartbreaking examples, truly. Well, that replacing exercise too. Could you speak a little bit about that? Because that's that has always been my hope that I would be able to eat with no consequences. You mentioned that several times, just being able to eat with no consequences, which hasn't been
Hmm.
my experience, but I'm always hopeful. And then this replace exercise with food. Oh, I like that idea.
Yes, I know. I would have liked that a lot too, but it
Didn't
doesn't quite
work.
work that way. I think that um, there have been some ads throughout history where there's the ones that combine exercise, and then there's the ones that replace exercise. More we see the ones that combine exercise, the running around while we're eating cereal. There was uh, uh, eating cereal in a spin class, things like that for different products. But then there was one, and I wish I could remember the name of the product, but it was actually called Eating Exercises, and it made fun of it was supposed to be this spa, and it was, I think it was ice cream, and they were lifting the spoon, one, two, one, two, one. And so it was more exercise along the lines of it, but then they would stop and they'd just sit there and eat. And, this was several years ago. It's not a real current one, but that's the way that they, that's the goal. Like, as you're saying, that's the goal, is to replace exercise with eating. And, you look at Cheerios, for example. Everybody thinks Cheerios is a really healthy cereal, and it's probably better than some of the others, but in my experience, there isn't a healthy cereal
Mhm.
that, it's been processed. And I mean, that's not true. There are some, but not the more popular ones, very small amount. And, Cheerios advertises heart healthy. And so the idea is if you eat Cheerios, you're doing something good for your heart, and you don't have to exercise as much. That's the unspoken part.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's and when they have in February, they turn them in the Cheerios into little heart-shaped things for, Heart Awareness Month or whatever it's called. And so if you eat these, you're eating the stuff you that they're advertising is healthy. And, what are you saying? You don't have to exercise, you know? So,
Very peculiar. And the
mhm.
other two that you mentioned, achieving good health and increasing intelligence.
Hmm.
Would you speak
Yes,
a
we
little
have
to that?
smart food. Have you heard about smart food?
I've
They
heard
actually
about it.
have yes, it doesn't actually make you smart, but they have made commercials throughout the years. And the ones that I mentioned in my book were there was a young girl, and she's watching a Jeopardy type show on television, and she's eating this popcorn, which again has ingredients in it that are also ultra processed. And she's eating this popcorn, and she's answering every single question right on the Jeopardy like game show. So the association is that if you eat this food, you'll get smart. And they did it in many different ways. They got that across. The other association is that smart food, meaning they're correlating it to healthy food. Like, you're smart enough to eat food that's not ultra processed, even though it actually is.
The twists and
Mm.
turns. Would you talk a bit about the manufacturers and their scientists that literally create the bliss point, create the point where the substance is addictive? And I've met one of those people, very nice human being, and in service of a company that makes billions of dollars from their products, from his work making the Bliss Point what it is for that product. Heartbreaking.
That's right. It is. And you have the bliss point for the product, and you have the point in the advertisement, which is also is the bliss point. If in Michael Moss's book, Hooked, he talks about attending an advertising research foundation meeting where they actually the title of the presentation was something similar to using brain technology to sell more food. That was the focus of and they used a commercial for, in this case, it was for Budweiser, and they had the commercial for Budweiser. It was where the dog comes in. This was I think 2015, and the dog comes in, and it didn't result in any sales, any additional sales, and so they used technology. They used the functional MRI, which measures your brain waves, and EEG in their research. So they showed this ad to people, and they found out that they missed that, what they call the bliss point in advertising, where your emotions, you've triggered emotions that make people motivated to go out and purchase the product. And they don't just do this for Budweiser, they do this for all sorts of things. So you have the bliss point of it being this food is, it gets the salt, the crunch, the salt, the sweetness, it's all in there. And they found that this is the food that you're not going to be able to resist. And then they advertise it in a way that makes you unable to resist the commercial and the way they've presented it. So you have that combination that is just, it's overwhelming to people. It really truly is.
And we have children who are watching these commercials hours per day, or seeing them in all of the various media that they experience. Very disturbing. The green bean casserole. So this is the green bean casserole season. And I remember the product and the crunchy, my grandmother put crunchy onions on top, the crispy onions out of a can on top of the mushroom, on top of the cream of mushroom, on top of the green beans, and that this was a standard fare at holiday meals. Had to be there.
Mm-hmm.
If it weren't there, we missed it. We wanted to know,
Right.
Where's the beef? Not the beef, but where's this meal? Where's the proper part? So these kinds of things that become standard within cultural milieu, within ethnic and religious celebrations, all of these things that say to us, we have to have these things at a particular time.
Mm.
What is that about? Maybe a few words about that.
I think that started very early on from a good intention that turned bad. I think in the beginning, before advertising took over our lives, and very early on, people got together to celebrate holidays, and they had, we were in a farming society. They put what they had together and were brought together by this, sharing of the meal at a holiday. And then advertisers, through the years have kind of taken that and turned it into an event that you have to have the perfect food, and it has to be their food, of course. And you have to overeat. And, the green bean casserole is a great example. It started out, I think it was Campbell Soup who did it. And it started out early as just a thing that was a recipe passed around, and then it gained momentum, and it got more and more popular, and it was promoted more and more. And, as the processing of the soup chain, we didn't call it ultra processed in the early days. We didn't have that definition, until years later. But we did, and we thought, I think at that point, that it was probably just soup. So wasn't it healthy? And now we know it's high in sodium, and there's all kinds of ingredients in there that aren't as healthy as we might think they are. And if there are healthy looking ingredients, they've been processed to the point where all the healthy stuff is taken out anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So as the And now we learned about bliss points and making it, you know, even tastier. So it's a process, through the years. It's been where we start out with something that might look like it's a good idea and might even not be as dangerous as it's turned into. So now we have to have this, green bean casserole or whatever it is that has to be at the table. And there are going to be about, a million ads to remind you that you have to have this green bean casserole at your table until you finally break down and go get it because you've been told you have to have this. And, it's a standard that's created by advertising. And it's not a realistic standard, but it's a standard that people don't want to fall below. Who wants to think that at their table they don't have the green bean casserole because everybody else is going to have it? And that's not really realistic, but that's what the belief is that's being told to consumers over and over and over again. So you have a lot of things going on there when it comes to holidays and making it look perfect. And it's not just food, there's a lot of other things, but with the food, it's usually the mother's job or the grandmother's job to make sure that this meal is perfect because everybody else is having this perfect meal. And we see on television, or we see on social media, we see these ads of this perfect holiday with this beautiful food at the table. And so, of course, we want that in our lives, even though the way to get it isn't through eating this food, but that's what we're told over and over and over again.
I was a teacher in 1971 in Los Angeles, and they have a lot of advertising people there, and I knew one of them and invited him to come to my classroom. And he was one of the people involved with the Pepsi commercials with the um, the polar bears walking around and
Hmm.
looking human and talking and all of that. And that was a shift in in the commercials at that time, in the competition with Coca-Cola, of course. And so he came and talked about what they were doing with that commercial and how important it was to Pepsi to come across as friendly, as family oriented, all of these kinds of things. And we looked at advertising. That was part of our critical thinking process that we were involved in. We looked at advertising, and people um, captured pieces of advertising and shared it and looked carefully at what was being said and seen. And that was in the 70s. But somehow I think we've
Hmm.
lost that piece and in the
Hmm.
intervening years. And one of your recommendations is to go to critical thinking, to go to that reclamation, to reclaim our critical thinking skills and the ability to assess. So, can you talk a little bit more about how that might happen in schools and in homes and within ourselves? Because maybe the ones who can actually make the difference are teenagers who rebel in a new way, possibly.
Hmm. That would be nice. Um, I think if we're not taught from when we're young to think about the messages in these advertisements and who's to benefit. I mean, the biggest question is who benefits from this message? If we have to convince everyone that they're perfect, or we have to, show children that this is how you play, we have happy meals so children can play. They get a prize in a Cracker Jack box. Food isn't about play. And, it's not, of course, children are going to want that because it looks fun. It looks fun to adults on TV, but we have to start to educate children about what happens when you eat these things. What happens in your body? What does it do to your body? And it's kind of hard for a child to understand that if you eat a lot of these products, you're more susceptible to cancer and to diabetes and to heart disease. They're not really thinking about that at that age, and everybody else is eating it. And it really would take a big shift, but at least to make them aware of the messages that are being sent. You can say, something as simple as like if you're watching a commercial and there's some sort of an unhealthy food and the kids are running around, you can say, that food might give you energy for about a few minutes, but then you'll be tired for the rest of the day. Or just plant a seed. All we have to do is start to plant a seed, even in the younger children. And then as they get older, especially young women who go through such a horrible, young girls who go through such a horrible transition and period in their lives where they're expected, they think they're supposed to be perfect and they're supposed to look like these images. We should talk to them. If you eat that, then you don't look like that because you have a beautiful, celebrity advertising some product that you even wonder if they have ever tasted it. And because the size of their body doesn't indicate a lot of eating of that product. And we need to, I think, just uncover all these messages and tell children, teenagers, young adults the dangers of eating these products and the false messages in these advertisements. Because I think what's happened over the years is we just haven't noticed the food advertisements. They just, oh, advertising, it's just part of life. We just have to deal with it. We don't have to deal with it. We should think about it. We shouldn't just let these messages come in to our, if we go on social media, we're subjected to ads. We have to have ads. There are a lot of things in our lives that are set up so we have to have advertising. But you can limit that. In my own life, I don't, except for when I'm doing research, I try very hard not to watch advertisements. I don't watch, I watch PBS. There's very few, they're sponsored, but there's no traditional advertising on there. And I try to stream things when I can or watch DVDs, as old fashioned as that sounds. But, if we can limit our exposure to these ads, I feel it would be important for children, think about how you can do things with your child or create activities that don't have them sitting in front of screens where they're seeing these ads just overwhelming at an overwhelming pace.
And that's another aspect of having children and families doing things together that are not involving screens and involve physical activity, involve gardening is one of the things that's been promoted over the years to bring families together to show that when real food is created out of the earth, or real animals are used, chickens. I mean, seeing these things really in their own habitats, going to a community-sponsored agriculture site and picking the products right off the vines. These are fresh. They don't have any processing involved except my hand picking. Those are
Mhm.
the kinds of things that collectively, if we participate in those kinds of things, we have families that are healthier just because they are doing things together, having time to talk, having time to, respond to each other, to be in loving and I don't convivial places with each other. That's a whole different thing than sitting in front of screens and watching it and being, involved with all of these things. At least to turn off the sound and create a conversation during those periods when the advertisement is on, to take the attention away from them. There have to be
Mhm.
things that we can start to do differently. But all of your book really does address that. Now, you talk about food addiction repeatedly, and you talk about the interconnection of food addiction and these advertisements, and you've mentioned it throughout this. Um, how do you see our process and progress towards food addiction being in the International Classification of Diseases and or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual here in the United States? What do you think?
I think we're making progress, but we still have a ways to go. It's not in there yet. Um, but I think it would be a life changer because it would allow, of course, treatment and all the things that come with, being in the DSM and all those things. But it would also create an awareness that isn't there now because there are too many. It's too easy to say food addiction isn't real. because, a lot of the studies that say that food addiction isn't real, or the ones that have come up, are funded in part by some of these food manufacturers who have a vested interest in their products not being identified as addictive. And so, if we have something in these manuals, then what will happen is at least there'll be awareness, and people can understand that this is what happens. This is how they're trying to, trick us into buying them. And when we buy them, we want more and more and more, if we're food addicted. So I think there's great progress. There's more awareness than there's ever been, and we still have a little ways to go.
Well, I'm very hopeful that soon it will be in the DSM and in the ICD, and that the International Food Addiction Consensus Conference this past May moved forward with ultra processed food, substance use disorder, and that there were 37 out of 40 professionals that were in agreement, in consensus about that. And previously, the ICD folks had said we had no consensus. So we have consensus now about one aspect of food addiction. Certainly, that doesn't include my own personal choice of food addiction, the volume eating, and the grazing. Those were additional behaviors that were certainly my own. But that's a huge start in the right direction to look at these ultra processed things. Could you speak just a little bit longer about what ultra processed means? So for those people that, are like, what is this that you're really talking about? You've mentioned several different aspects, but to elaborate.
Sure. It's really the creation of food substances is the simplest way to, when we talk about ultra processing, we're talking about, it depends on the food, but we take the food and we boil it, or we, put bleach in it, or we put chemicals in it. We can't take, let's say, strawberries. We can't take fresh strawberries and just mix them up and put them in something in a box and expect them to last on the shelf indefinitely. And so if we want to make something that includes strawberries, we have to, first we want to make it sweet enough. So we take and we boil the strawberries, and, and then we add things, add preservatives and things that, or add thickeners or emulsifiers or some sort of chemical, to get exactly the texture we want and to preserve them at the same time. So basically, we've taken all the nutrients out of these strawberries so that they don't even have what a fresh strawberry would have. And we take and we process them so much that they're unrecognizable. So ultra processing is exactly what it says. We've processed it to the point of it's not really even food anymore. It's a food substance. And you can recognize this by ingredients that you don't have any, even, that you wouldn't have in your kitchen, even high fructose corn syrup, that's just taking these strawberries and adding some stuff and making them really sweet. And, so it really is about the processing of it, which is the definition. The man who was the lead on the study for this in Brazil, he realized that Brazil had all of a sudden had this overweight, this real obesity issue, and decided to look into it, look past just, eating too much and blaming the people. And he came up with this definition of, that it's been processed to the point of, that it causes issues in people, and it does cause weight gain, is what he concluded.
Well, in the weight gain, we can have people that are thin on the outside and fat inside, TOFI. So it's not always visible on the outside, but it may be around the visceral organs and harming people, even if they look all right on the outside. So it
Mhm.
isn't only about obesity, but it certainly includes that. And you put numbers of 87 million Americans struggle with obesity, with as many as half suffering from food addiction in 2022. And the numbers of children that are part of this population now, that is an increasing number of people. And when we look around in any public place, we see young children that are very similar in size, but shorter as their parents. So we parents need to make the changes and change what we're bringing into the homes. And you've said that repeatedly. So, oh, Debbie, thank you for your work. Before we look close, though, what's next? And have you written another book?
Yes, I actually have written another book. It's in the peer review process. It's about health halos and ultra processing food. And health halos are when you put the fruit in the, in the commercial, or you put the vegetables. It's what it says. It's you put something healthy next to something that's unhealthy, and the healthy thing is supposed to cast a halo over the unhealthy thing. And that's much more common than you would think. And it's in food advertising, of course. That's what I study. So I'm hoping it will be out next year.
Oh, how exciting. Well, I
Mhm.
encourage people to get this current book. Will you say the title and describe the cover before we close? I love the cover.
Sure. Yes, it's called Happy Eating and Food Addiction in American Advertising. And on the cover is an advertisement for vitamin donuts. And vitamin donuts was a product in the 1940s during the war when, they enriched the flour, so they decided they could call it vitamin donuts. And that's how they sold it. I mean, it completely speaks to food addiction denial. Who doesn't want to eat donuts and get vitamins? But and to other people too. I think regular people want that too. But they were forced to the war office said that they couldn't advertise them as vitamin donuts because it was only the flour that was enriched and not the donuts themselves.
And there were happy children in the picture.
Oh
Very
yes,
happy
of
children.
course. Yes, there were happy children in the advertisement. Absolutely.
Um, well, I was one of those happy children. My grandmother used to make Krispy Kreme donuts. They looked like Krispy Kreme before Krispy Kreme came out. And we would eat our way around the flat surfaces in the kitchen. Do I have a
Yep.
family that has food addiction as one of our behaviors and experiences
Mhm.
and living with it? Yes. So, oh, Debbie, thank you so much. I'm so pleased that you have taken the time to be with us. Is there anything you'd like to share that we left out, or anything that you want a few last words?
I think the important thing that I'd like to say is it's just vital that people are aware of the messages being sent out through these advertisements because it really does affect your health, your children's health, and it's worth taking the time to look at them and think about what they're saying.
And with that, thank you. I'm very grateful for your dedication to the food addiction message getting out into the world. Thank you.
Thank you.